Hi guys, Christina McNair here with Fresh Start Relationship Coaching. I am the Relationship Facilitator. Thank you so much for watching today's video. This is the second installment to our new YouTube channel segment entitled Fresh Talk with Fresh Start. So I'm just going to jump right into the topic for today because you all know I like to keep it short and sweet. So today's topic is stop measuring your relationship by others because you don't know what's going on in their relationship or behind closed doors, or you don't know all of the ins and outs of their relationship, nor do you know all of the details. You only know what they choose to present to the public eye. And we have to constantly remind ourselves of that, especially we as in females, the women. And I am addressing myself as well. And so please don't think I'm just projecting this onto you. But this one is solely dedicated to my sisters. Sisters as in fellow women. Okay? Nothing racial. So moving on. Sisters, don't measure your relationship by someone else's because you don't know what type of damage you could bring upon your own relationship by doing so. Now, what made me think of this topic is I recently read a blog or an article, I can't remember from which website, but I also ended up seeing the same type of the same topic discussed in a Facebook discussion group. And it really caught my attention and made me think, maybe this topic is worth discussing or conversing about very briefly on Fresh Talk. So that's what I'm doing. So what I saw in the article and in the Facebook group is this couple that I oftentimes hear women referring to the man in this couple as their standard. What they're waiting on, the end all be all of men. And some of you right now may be thinking I'm referring to Jay-Z and Beyonce because so many people seem to measure their relationship by them. No. I am actually referring to Boaz and Ruth from a biblical story. Now, before you press stop and move on, please know this is not intended to be a Bible study at all. I am merely referencing it as a story that many people take and really internalize and make it their standard. They base their standard of the man that they're waiting to come their way off of this story of Ruth and Boaz. I mean, it's nothing to turn on any segment or portion of social media and see someone, whether it's a meme that's being shared that has gone viral, or a video of someone discussing it, or a blog, as I stated, it's usually a woman stating, I'm waiting on my Boaz. I'm waiting on my Boaz. I'm waiting on my Boaz. Sounds great, right? Well, here's the thing. There are a few details to that makes me wonder if you are familiar with the story, if you really know the story, or if you're just repeating something that you've heard that sounds great, right? So I'm not going to paint Boaz out to be a bad person because the story doesn't paint him to be a bad person. But I'm just going to state a few facts from the story or details from the story. So the story lets us know that Ruth was very loyal because she would not leave her mother-in-law, and she wanted to make sure that her mother-in-law was taken care of because she had lost her husband and her sons. They had all died, and she decided to stay with her mother-in-law even though they did not have much. They were barely making it. It also lets us know that Ruth was known around her hometown as well as the town where they lived as a noble woman. She was also a diligent woman, a very hard worker. Boaz found her working in his field. Hello? Working in his field. Now, how many of us are willing to get out in a field right now so that we can be seen by our Boaz? Hello? I don't want to work in the field. Thank God I already have my husband. If he had to find me in the field, I'd probably still be lost. Or he'd still be looking for me because I don't want to work in the field. And we have to be honest about that. Now, you can easily say, well, that was during the Bible times, the ancient times. It wouldn't be like that now. We still have many fields and we still need many laborers. So you can still be found by your Boaz in working in a field. But if that's the way that we were intended to be seen or be found by him, many of us will miss him. Let's just be honest. Okay. I've written down some notes so that I can be quick about this. The story also depicts Ruth as being very humble. Her mother-in-law, Naomi told her to go and lie at his feet, uncover his feet and lie at his feet until he wakes up and determines what he wants you to do. That's not gonna work for a lot of us. What you mean? Lay at his feet. I digress. But it's honest, many of us would have been lost at that point. But Ruth did exactly what Naomi told her to do. She was very obedient, and she was very much a servant, had a servant's heart, a servant's spirit. That's not very common either today, but that's neither here nor there. Ruth was also 40 years old. She had already been married. So when we say I'm waiting on my Boaz, technically we're saying, well, I'm waiting on my second husband. Okay, think about that. I'm waiting on my second husband because he was not her first husband. And also, Ruth was, I think I stated she was 40 years old. Now let's make some comparisons with Boaz. Boaz was 80 years old. You heard me correctly. 80 years old. How many of us at 40 years old really want to marry an 80-year-old man? Want to. It's our preference for love, because when we say we're waiting on our Boaz, that's what we are implying. We're waiting on our Prince Charming. But Boaz was anything but Prince Charming to Ruth, because he didn't even want to marry her first. And he didn't marry her because he was madly in love with her. He married her out of obligation. Is that how you want your spouse? Is that how you want your husband? You want your husband to marry you out of obligation? Really? That's what you want? Because that's what you're saying when you say, I'm waiting on my Boaz. Boaz was not in love with Ruth at all. He was the guardian redeemer for Naomi's husband's family, meaning it was their culture to make sure that any women left behind because their husbands had died, anyone who was a relative of the husband would take care of the women. So that's why he ended up marrying Ruth. And the reason why I said he didn't initially want to marry her is because there was a relative who was more closely related to the family than he. So he first went to him and said, hey, if you want to marry her, you can have her. Is that what excuse me? What? Okay. Yes. If you want to marry her, then you can have her. But if you don't, then I will purchase all of Naomi's property, and along with that, acquire a wife who was the wife of one of Naomi's sons, basically. And any children that they bore together would have to have the last name of that dead son to ensure that his name would carry on in his family and in his hometown. Okay, yeah, not sounding like a fairy tale to me. Also, when Ruth and Boaz did marry and they conceived a child who's a boy, they had a son. The story doesn't say anything about Ruth or Boaz having a son. It said Naomi now has a son. So their son was never even their own, because he was intended to be an heir, basically, someone who would continue on the family name so that it would not die out. Is that what you had in mind when you say, I want my Boaz? I'm waiting for my Boaz. I'm waiting for my Boaz. I don't think so. And then lastly, I would say that after they married and conceived their one child, Boaz died on the next day. The next day. Now, some of us, we might feel like, we're a little upset sometimes, like, oh, I wish he may not die, but I wish I just didn't have to deal with him right now. But we don't want him to die. He died the next day. So when you say, I'm waiting on my Boaz, you are saying you are waiting on a man who is twice your age. He was 80 years old, who will come and rescue you and your family. He didn't tell her to stop working in the fields, though. Now, mind you, he didn't pull her out of that field and say, oh, you don't have to work anymore, girl. I got you. No, he said he'd make her work a little easier and make sure she could bring in a little more, but he expected her to continue to work. So while you're waiting on your Prince Charming, if in fact by Prince Charming you mean you're waiting on someone who's going to come and sweep you off your feet, and you two are going to fall madly in love with one another, you're going to be passionate and extreme with one another and can't live without one another, you better not say you're waiting on Boaz. And also, if you are really waiting on someone to be found or to find you, if you're waiting on Boaz to find you, then you may have to get out and work hard and be found working. So I'll leave you on this note. If you're waiting on Boaz, then you might have to get yoked up and do some work. All right, thank you. This is Christina McNair with Fresh Start Relationship Coaching.